So this video is a continuation from the previous video. Okay, so we have gotten to the point with the shutter release, and that is what triggers the mirror to move out of the way so the sensor can be exposed to the image. And then you have all these different controls on your camera that allow you to manipulate the settings on your camera. But this is called your shutter release button. See, shutter release. This is where you want to roll your finger across the shutter. You don't want to press it. You just want to roll. It takes sharper, smoother pictures. This is the shutter. It opens like think about your eyes. And close your eyelids, and then open them, and then close them. And that's what a shutter does. It just lets light in. Now, unlike your eyelids that are skin, so you could look at light and see through your eyelids, these are made out of plastic, and so they literally block the sensor from getting any light. The mirror moves out of the way, the shutter opens, and then the image gets exposed and then saved and recorded. And there it is, moving. Shutter speed has to do with how fast that shutter moves. And we're going to talk in great detail about this in Photography 2. And I'll tell you what it is, what it does, and how you want to use it. Just some examples of exposure. And then you can see the slower shutter speed shows more motion blur. The faster shutter speed stops motion. And sometimes you want a slow shutter speed, and sometimes you want a fast shutter speed, and sometimes you want somewhere in between. So this is an interesting discussion that people have. You have stopped the motion of the bird. There's almost no motion blur. There's a tiny little bit of motion blur. And so for most people, when they see this, it's beautiful, but then it looks like he's just going to drop out of the sky because he's not moving. So quite often when you photograph a bird, it's kind of preferable to have a little bit of motion blur to show the wings are moving, so the bird feels like he's not going to fall out of the sky. And that you control with your shutter speed. And then you can overdo it, and then you can't see his wings at all. I mean, I think that's pretty good. You can still see his wings here, even though they're moving very quickly. Aperture has to do with the opening in your lens. That's actually more a part of a lens than it is of the camera. Everything we've talked about so far has been part of the camera. This is part of the lens. And it's the diaphragm right here, also known as the iris, that corresponds to the iris in your eye. And based on the setting on your camera, you control this. You can completely open it up and let in more light, just like when you're in the dark and the iris in your eye will open or contract to open the pupil to let in more light, so more light hits the back of your retina so you can see better. All the way down to you're in the bright sunny day and your iris contracts, so your pupil's small, so you're not blinding yourself with too much light. Works the exact same way with the camera. It's pretty cool. And we'll talk about this and why you want to choose different apertures in photography too. Just some general guides for how to choose aperture. And I have all this in PowerPoints and lecture that we discuss in Photography 2. And just more examples of why we have different settings. Okay, and so we put it all together. And we have multiple things. In order to get proper exposure, it's a combination of your ISO, your shutter speed, and your aperture. And we didn't start with that in this course on purpose. Every course I've ever taken on photography started with this. And I was trying to juggle this and composition, and I found that I didn't understand this until I started taking pictures, started figuring out what I wanted, started forming compositions, and then it made more sense to me as to what I needed to do. So I teach it in reverse. You're learning composition now, and in the next course, you'll learn how to do all this. And this is all here just for you to have, to start to understand, to take a look at this, start to understand this is what we're going to be working with next to get more detail and more control over your images. And the good thing about your cameras is that they'll give you a recommendation for where to start. I don't do any math. So let my camera tell me where to start, and then I make adjustments from there. And I'm going to teach you how to do that in photography too. And the light meter is built into your camera. We saw that in the original photo. It takes a reading of the scene and gives you a recommendation for your shutter speed and your aperture for your settings, and then you can take that shot, see how it looks, and then make adjustments from there. And your light meter is inside your viewfinder. It will show you how it's exposed and give you the opportunity to adjust it. Nikon and Canon are the two main camera brands sold. They're reliable. Their glass is the best. I've seen studies that say Nikon is like a fraction of a fraction better, but it doesn't matter. But there's a joke rivalry between Canon and Nikon, and you will sometimes see Canon and Nikon people joke about it. I do all the time. Some people don't like it, so I have to know them before I'll joke with them about it. But I'm a Nikon person. I don't have a problem with Canon. It's just they think differently, and Nikon is something I started using. Somebody I knew had a Nikon, and I had a spare Nikon, I should say, and they let me try it out, and I really like the way Nikon set up. So I've been a loyal Nikon fan ever since. You want to know anything about Nikon? If I don't know, I can tell you how to find out. Canon, I mean, they just think differently. So you'll see here, even for the metering for the different cameras, they have different icons and different ways of telling you how they've metered. And then when you've got different shooting modes for your camera, it's not bad to work with auto mode initially when you're working with your composition, as I've recommended those of you that are using a DSLR in this class do. But it's time to start breaking away from that, because what is the point in having a sophisticated, expensive camera if you're just going to let it do all the shots? You might as well have a point and shoot. Might as well use your phone. So we're gonna get into learning how to actually start using shutter, aperture, and ISO to get your exposure, and make the shot your own. This is just sort of something that you can understand. There are different shooting modes on the dial of your camera. I'm going to tell you, I work here. Whoops, MAS. That's it. That's where I work, MAS. I don't use anything else on here. However, I'm not saying you shouldn't. And when you're learning, it's not a bad thing to let the camera help you out. Okay, I use manual, aperture, and shutter priority. Mostly these two. These are the main two I use. But if you'd like to work with those, this is the one for Nikon. I had a hard time finding this, actually, and I don't think I could find one. No, I found one for Canon. Okay, so this is from Nikon. Had a hard time finding these for some reason. And then this is for Canon. So this tells you what its different modes are. Night and low light photography is a different subject because your camera's light meter does not do well in low light. And so then you're going to have to rely on some math to make these shots. And as I said, that's another class. That is photography 2. It's DMPT 2705. And it's offered. It's usually offered every semester after this class is taught. And these are just some low light shots. You have to have a DSLR to get these kind of shots, and a tripod. Oh, and there's no Lav 11 because I'm not really sure what to have you do other than start taking a look at what's out there. It's very complicated to know what you want, and initially a lot of people just go by price until you get comfortable with the camera, and then you start understanding what you want to look for in your camera. But if you're serious about becoming a photographer, you're going to have to buy your own equipment, or you're going to have to work for someone else who has their equipment. And I recommend doing working for a professional photographer first. You want to, once you've completed the TCC in this program, or you've completed several courses, you should be paid for your work. In the beginning, while you're learning, volunteer. It's free education. Don't look at it as I'm working. I'm not going to work for free. Look at it as I'm getting educated for free by helping this person who's a known photographer do it. Take those opportunities. But then later on, once you really, once you've earned your credential and you've gotten some experience, you can start getting paid, and then be somebody's photography assistant. You will learn so much more that way than you will on your own. You'll make fewer mistakes. So I highly, highly, highly encourage you all to work for someone else first. It doesn't pay very well to work for someone else in the beginning, but the knowledge you'll amass is worth the trade-off. And then eventually, when you do have your own photography company, you'll be really powerful, because you'll have learned from me teaching you what everything is, and then you will go on and learn from a photographer in the field in a way I can't teach you in a classroom, and then you'll be good. So that's where this course ends with the PowerPoints. If you want to talk to me about cameras, I am always open and available to do that with you. And this is sort of my advice, is to stick with a name brand like Nikon or Canon. Initially, one of the lower end cameras is a good place to start in, unless you just want to really invest in a good one. It's your personal choice. And you have to figure out what you want to do. So if you want to talk to me about it, I'm open. And hope you have learned quite a bit about composition in this class, about how to take good shots. And then in the next one, we will learn how to make it even better, take it to the next level. Okay? See you in the next course.